Ladies and gentlemen, this is the By the Book podcast with Mr. By the Book, Gaston LaRue. And today is our first chapter of the podcast from the ancient book of wrestling. And I am Gaston LaRue, Mr. By the Book, and today I'm here to just introduce myself a little bit. And I'm here to just educate you on who I am, educate everyone on what my goals for this podcast are. And I'm here to uh, express to you what you can expect with this upcoming podcast. I have been wrestling for almost 3.5 years now. I've been a professional wrestler, and I feel like I have a lot to kind of offer to the business, and there's a lot that I just want to give towards the business that I love. I really enjoy professional wrestling. I've grown up around it my entire life. Professional wrestling is my livelihood at this point. I work from home, but I was working a job making like $14 an hour being a special needs teacher. And this past year, I kind of decided that I didn't want to do that anymore, and I wanted to just kind of put my stock into wrestling. And so I'm going to tell you my story today about what led me to professional wrestling, my background in professional wrestling, how I became Gaston LaRue, how I entered this world of professional wrestling, a world that was not entirely foreign to me, but the atmosphere of professional wrestling was pretty foreign to me. But first, today, I would like to reflect on the travels I had in wrestling this past weekend, and I would like to make this a weekly thing every episode that I have. So this weekend, I was at Pro Wrestling Mid South in Dyersburg, Tennessee. I was working for the promoter Greg Anthony, and I defended my AIWF World Television Championship. And for those who don't know what the AIWF is, the AIWF, the AIWF is a promotion in North Carolina that has been running for 31 years, but they affiliate themselves with promotions all across the United States of America and the world. They have several promotions in Mexico and Canada and across the sea and so I am currently their AIWF World Television Champion. I defended on and off television. But this weekend I defended against a guy named James Elliott in Dyersburg, Tennessee. We had a very old school wrestling match. The Tennessee crowd is extremely old school, and they were not very fond of Mr. By the Book this weekend. But the fact of the matter is that I went out there and I was very excited to wrestle in Tennessee. Um, it was my return for the first time in a little over a year in Tennessee. So, yeah, I went out there. I document all my matches, by the way, and you'll hear me talk about this. This was match 294 of my 3.5 year career. We went out. We had a pretty good match. It was very old school, as it should be with that crowd specifically. And you have to gauge your crowd on what you're going to do. But I went out, I ran my mouth, I held up my championship, and I retained my championship in Dyersburg, Tennessee. Um, he got me backed in a corner, started beating me down in the corner. I tripped him up. I mount pinned him. I totally didn't put my feet on the ropes. and yeah, so and I won 100% by the book. So the by the book thing, I'll delve into here in a second as well. Because you might be like, by the book, like what's that all about? What's that deal? If you don't know who I am, and you're seeing this podcast for the first time, and you could be seeing it as soon as it comes out. You could be seeing it later on down the road. Um, yeah, so the that was my weekend. I only had the one show. I was supposed to have another show on Sunday, which would have been for Supreme Wrestling in Seymour, Indiana, as a part of Supreme Wrestling Ice Cold. I was supposed to have another match there, but my match hadn't been announced yet, and I ended up not being able to make the show due to some car issues, which is never fun, but better safe than sorry. Yeah, and then this weekend I will be in Dayton, Ohio for XVW Extreme Valley Wrestling. I will be defending my AIWF World Television Championship once again against none other than Avery Hertz. He is a very talented wrestler in the Ohio, Indiana kind of area. He wrestles in Michigan a lot as well. Very young guy, been wrestling for the last year, I believe. But you wouldn't be able to tell, like, that he hasn't been doing it as long as I have. So I'm very much looking forward to that match. We were supposed to have a match a few weeks ago. Um, on December 23rd, and we had a whole big ice storm here. So the show got moved, and then I was unable to compete there because I won the AIWF World Television Championship that day instead, on December 30th. So let me get into what this podcast really is. So, what this podcast really is I'm looking to bring on numerous professional wrestling guests, both independent and then hopefully eventually I can get some AEW guests, some WWE guests, some Impact Wrestling guests, people like that. And I'm really trying to offer what I can, whether it is exposure for them or just getting to sit down and talk with them and interact with them. Because I'm friends with a lot of people in wrestling, but I don't feel like I really have gotten to know their stories. And so that's what I really want to get to know is their stories. I really want to them to get to know me and my story. I want to share my story of professional wrestling. I want to chronicle my story of professional wrestling. I want everyone to kind of know who I am and what I'm about. I want everyone to understand like what the by the book mentality comes with. I want everyone to understand um, who I am, where I come from. I want everyone to really get a gauge on who Gaston LaRue is as a person and as a character. So, what I'm going to start with today is just giving a little background on who is Gaston LaRue, who is Mr. By the Book. And so I guess I will start with how I got into professional wrestling. I started watching wrestling from a very young age with my brother and my father, brother LaRue and father LaRue. We were watching wrestling all the time. One of my earliest memories is Evolution, turning on Randy Orton. I had VHS tapes of WrestleMania of this older gentleman who would record the pay per views for us and give us the VHS tapes, which was awesome. Um, and so, from a very young age, wrestling was integrated into my mind. Wrestling was very integrated in everything. I fell in love with it very quickly. Rey Mysterio, John Cena were guys who I loved to watch. Chris Benoit, even. I understand that that name is a little bit touchy, but I was I loved his work. I loved Eddie Guerrero as well. When Eddie passed, and when Benoit passed, I was heartbroken. I literally cried because my favorite wrestler had passed, in both of them. Another really early memory was Rumble 2004, Chris Benoit winning the Royal Rumble match, and WrestleMania 20, Eddie and Benoit at the end of WrestleMania 20. And I think that those two's influences can be seen in my wrestling style as well. The very technical kind of style, but also with Eddie, very eccentric in how I wrestle. And so I found myself just like loving wrestling. I watched these VHS tapes for a very long time from a very young age. Um, Around junior high, was when I was like 13 or 14, I found myself really disliking wrestling. Specifically after the Undertaker's streak got broken, I kind of fell out of love with wrestling. I was just like, man, this is not, I don't love this anymore. I don't like this anymore. So I found myself getting into like, more nerdier things. You see the Captain America shield behind me for you video watchers. For you audio listeners, I have a half broken Captain America shield from Avengers Endgame, and it's like a replica. It's really great. and it sits behind me. Um, anyways, to get on with where I how I got into wrestling, I grew up with it. I fell back into love with wrestling when I experienced British independent wrestling, actually, which I feel like I also use as a lot of influences for how I wrestle and my wrestling style. And then I discovered Shinsuke Nakamura versus AJ Styles from Wrestle Kingdom 10, was it? Yeah, I think it was Wrestle Kingdom 10. And that match is such a masterclass of professional wrestling. And I fell in love with the story and everything all over again. AJ Styles returned at Royal Rumble later that January. Royal Rumble is my favorite wrestling pay per view of the year, by the way. So Royal Rumble coming up has me very excited. But AJ Styles coming back, I was like, oh my gosh, that's AJ Styles. Like this is the guy that I grew up watching on TNA as well, and a guy who like stood out to me from a very young age. And I always found myself having this knack for liking these like more technical guys. And so I caught back up with wrestling. I watched, especially with NXT. I caught up with all the NXT takeovers. I got WWE Network. I watched every takeover imaginable. I watched every playlist, whether it was the Rock and Austin feud, whether it was the Austin and Vince feud. I just did everything I could to catch back up with wrestling that I missed for about 2 years. I continued to fall in love with professional wrestling. I continued to love professional wrestling. And the more and more it grew, I just wanted to like be there live. I wanted to feel it. And so I went to WrestleMania 34 with my dad and my brother. My very first WrestleMania I'd ever gone to, my first pay-per-view I had ever gone to, and I loved it. I just loved it. I loved the feel. I got to see Adam Cole and Johnny Gargano and the whole NXT gang getting off of the bus, going into the Superdome, which was fantastic. Adam Cole was like super nice. Johnny Gargano was super nice as well. And then Royal Rumble 2019, I went to Arizona, where I met Jeff Hardy. And meeting Jeff Hardy was kind of one of the clicking points with me, that I wanted to be a professional wrestler. At the time, I was dating a girl who definitely would not have wanted me to be a professional wrestler at all. But I met Jeff Hardy at Royal Rumble weekend, not at Royal Rumble, but at that weekend. And I saw him and how he interacted with these special needs kids in front of me. And that's kind of what um, drove me into being a special needs teacher as well. So he was so loving to them and gentle and sweet, and like everyone was getting their 30 seconds or whatever with them and getting moved on. And but these kids were taking a while just like standing up by Jeff Hardy. um but like he was just okay with it. He was a professional, and he wasn't trying to rush them along. He was just so sweet and gentle with them, and it didn't feel like he was bothered by them. And I looked at that and I was like, that's what I wanna be. I wanna be that for people. As a professional wrestler, I wanna be a superstar for that. I wanna, in that way is what I mean. Um, I want to inspire kids like that. These kids were so excited. They were talking to me and my dad in line. They were right in front of us, and they were so excited and to meet Jeff Hardy, and I wanna be able to inspire people like that. I want to have that kind of impact on people. And granted, as we know, because of news outlets and stuff, Jeff has his own issues. He has his own personal problems. But I just want to give children that kind of experience. Um, I want to be someone that they love and they'll look at. As I got older and back into wrestling, I fell in love with Dolph Ziggler in his heel run and Seth Rollins in his heel run. And that's kind of what got me really into heels, exactly. And For those of you who don't know, I prominently work as a heel professional wrestler. Um, I'm much better at it than when I'm a babyface, to be completely honest. But I really loved their work, and that's when I grew up watching the older Ric Flair, the babyface Ric Flair, in WWE. But I went back and I watched the charismatic Ric Flair of old from the NWA, from the Crockett Promotions, from WCW. Not this Ric Flair that WWE kind of paints at times. Um, I love WWE. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, I didn't know like who Ric Flair was until I watched Ric Flair in action, and I was like, man, that's what I that's what I want. So that summer of 2019, I was planning to go to college. I was graduating high school. I was planning to go to college to be a vet, actually, but I discovered that that's not exactly something that I was into. That wasn't something that I really wanted to do. I just felt like I had to decide something um, based on my interests. But I realized quickly that it's not something I wanted as a job. I find myself often um, doing things that trying to do things as a job that I really just should do as a hobby, because when I start doing it as a job, I don't really like it as much. And professional wrestling is like the only thing that I don't really see as a job, even though I get paid for it. It's something that I just love doing. So I decided not to go to college. My girlfriend and I broke up, and I decided, hey, I'm not going to go to college. It's not for me. Seems like a waste of money for me. I want to be a professional wrestler because my parents, God love them. They were hammering in my head like, you need to do something that you love. You need to do something that will make you happy. Because I was in a very depressed state, and I think at some point in this podcast I'll talk about depression, and especially during like suicide awareness and stuff like that. I've shared my story in front of a live crowd before, and I'll play that sometime when the time comes. But so I found myself very much in this dark headspace, and I needed something that I loved and something that I could um, just be an artist with. And because I feel like I'm a very artistic person and a creative person, and so I decided to go to professional wrestling. And when I was 14 years old, local professional wrestling had come to my hometown with a promotion that ran in Madison, Indiana, called Supreme Wrestling. And Supreme Wrestling's head trainer was Eric Draven. I messaged through the website, and their social guy slash website guy, Jason Cohen, directed me to Eric Draven. And so I told Eric Draven, hey, I'm interested in training. When is it? He told me it's every Tuesday and Saturday before shows. And they run weekly, by the way, they run weekly shows. And so he tells me all this, and I'm like, okay, all right, I'm in. Um, I'll be there. So I show up. He told me to dress comfortable, wear knee pads, wear shoes, tennis shoes. So I show up, and man, I was so bruised after that first day. But I knew that it was something that I loved and I could sink myself into, and it felt so therapeutic. Um, Finding something you love is extremely important, and I think that it can be therapy for you. And I had a lot of anger build up for a lot of different reasons at that time, and maybe someday I'll get into those things. But um, I just fell in love immediately. I took 74 clotheslines or something crazy on my first day, not even knowing how to bump, but it was, just to kind of weed you out and see like, if you really wanted it, and I really wanted it. And to be completely honest, I was super unathletic. I was so unathletic to the point where my trainer, Eric Draven, has even told me that he wasn't even sure if I would make it. And now here we are, 3.5 years later. Um, well, 4 years later from when I was training. Um, so yeah, so I got into training. My first match happened September 19th, September 14th, September 14th. of 2019, and it was against a guy named Josh Lewis. We were working a deal where I was the referee at Supreme Wrestling, and I was very by the book. I didn't let anyone break rules. I was super strict. Josh and Eric Draven, my trainer, um, were paired together. They were a part of Custom Made, and so he put Josh up against me, and the crowd was aware that I was training, I believe. But I think like they really knew I was training here because Draven brought it up. He was like, "Oh, you're training? Well, you get a match tonight." And then it ended up being with Josh, who just absolutely destroyed me. Um, but yeah, so since they knew I was training, if we were low on talent, because running a weekly show is not very easy. Sometimes you just don't have enough people. Sometimes you have to have people work twice or whatever. So I had the opportunity to work 4 or 5 times between September and December. I had a couple of times where I was able to wrestle in front of the crowd. I had generic black tights that were falling off of me practically. No, no drawstring, no anything. I had a pair of title boxing um, boots that I like borrowed from someone else. I was not like prepared to like be wrestling, but I was, and I was super happy about it. Um, my first couple matches are really bad. Uh, my favorite one from that very early point was one with a guy named Angus Barnett, who's just a really great professional wrestler. Especially he's a Supreme regular. He kind of stuck around the area. He does it more of as like a hobby, but he's so good. He's incredible. If you can find some of his matches on YouTube, I recommend it. I have my matches with him up on YouTube. They're really some of my just most fun that I've had in the ring. And then we get to December 27th, I believe it is, of 2019. And I referee this match between Leon Elliott, who was the Supreme Heavyweight Champion at the time, and um, and Seth Gear. And so they go at it. Two big guys just have a hoss fight. Leon wins, retains his Supreme Heavyweight Championship. But there's this thing every year that Supreme Wrestling does, and it's an 8-person steel cage where they enter kind of like war games, one at a time, and then when all 8 are in the ring, then you can eliminate each other. So Draven had won it that year, and he was prepared to cash in his surviving the steel win. About 2 weeks earlier, I had stunned Eric Draven when he was pushing me around in a tag team match he had, and I hit him with a stunner and cost them to lose their match. And then the next week, I proceeded to have a match with Draven where I won by disqualification because he just beat the crap out of me with a belt. And he kept, and the whole thing was that I was like the commissioner's dog, like the man in charge's dog. His name was AJ, and that I just was like, obeying him, and like, he was having me screw Draven over, and that he was just using me and all this stuff. And it was a great storyline that we had going. So Draven comes out and he's about to cash in. Leon fights back. Leon hits his big bicycle boot. He goes for the pin. One, two. I hesitate my hand and I hold it and I stop. And then Leon's expression is wonderful. I have a great photo of just my smarmy grin. And at that point, the crowd just starts screaming at me. And that at that moment, I knew I was like, yeah, I I have this heel thing down. Because like in training, like when we would cut promos, I mostly would do it as a heel. Because that's just what I wanted to be. That's what I resonated with the most. And so Leon looks at me. It's priceless. He gets in my face. Leon turns around. Bam. I think it was the award that he used, the Surviving the Steel award that he used to cash in right to the head. I helped Draven win and pin Leon. I become affiliated with Draven. I become a part of Custom Made. I choke out the commissioner until we finally get ran off by Seth again, who comes out to help Leon. It was just so good. It was just so good, and the crowd react like it was a packed crowd that night. The crowd reaction was perfect, yelling slurs at me, yeah, yeah, cussing and carrying on at me, and it was great. I felt the emotion. I felt all of it. And so that's how I really got into it. And where the by the book thing came from was kind of we played into it with the whole me being a very strict referee thing, and it came out perfectly. I played Gaston in drama club in my senior year of high school, and Chuck McRoberts, one of the guys who kind of helped train me, um, his daughter Bailey in was in the sorry, my phone is being difficult. His daughter was in the Beauty and the Beast play with me, and so they started calling me Gaston, and it was just kind of a natural thing. The crowd started calling me Gaston because everyone else was calling me Gaston, and so I just made a character out of it. I made it my thing. I use the Gaston song as my theme song. I use a rock version of it now, actually. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my story of how I got my start into professional wrestling, and I wrestled for Supreme for about a year strictly, and then I started to venture out a little more and take more bookings, and now I'm the AIWF World Television Champion. I just defended in Tennessee. I'm defending in Ohio this weekend. I am defending in North Carolina in March. I have a lot of really great opportunities coming up. And I have so many stories that I want to share with all of you in the coming weeks and months and hopefully years. I really want this to be a success. I want this to be great. I want to have on guests every week. It's not just going to be me sitting here and talking into a microphone. I definitely want to have guests on and talk about the business with my guests. I want to talk about how they got into the business. I want to add them to the ancient book of wrestling. I want to add them to the history books. Um, I want their stories to be told as well, just as much as mine, because a lot of these guys that I'm going to bring on are independent wrestlers, so I feel like don't really get enough love. But I also am definitely looking to bring on like some larger names, and stuff like that. So I have a lot of really good guests lined up that I think you'll find interesting. A lot of really good people that I have met in this business and that I talk to on a regular basis. I plan to have members of the faction I'm involved in, the Tragedy Boys, be on the podcast rather frequently as well. So it's not just going to be me sitting and talking to a mic. I'm not just going to be talking about wrestling news or talking about the week in wrestling or anything like that. I just want to be sharing my stories, my experiences, and get to sit and talk to others for all of you to hear. If you have any ideas, find me on social media. You can find me on Twitter at Gaston LaRue. You can find me on Instagram at underscore pro wrestling Gaston underscore. You can find me on Facebook at Gaston LaRue as well. And you can find my YouTube channel at Gaston LaRue, where you will have the video version of this. The last thing I want to do on today's podcast before we go is I would like to show you these promos promoting my matches this upcoming week in Dayton, Ohio against Avery Hertz for the AIWF World Television Championship, as well as my promo for Jeffrey John for January 27th at Hybrid Championship Wrestling, which will be taking place in Terre Haute, Indiana. Avery Hertz, this Saturday night, January the 14th, Dayton, Ohio, XVW. I return to Dayton, Ohio to defend my AIWF World Television Championship against you. And the way I understand it is that Tuesday night you earned this opportunity against Nate McLean, and I'm not surprised. You're a talented wrestler. You're a fantastic professional wrestler. But Avery, when you step into the ring with the holder of the ancient book of wrestling, when you step into the ring with me, you will lose, and when you fail, it'll be 100% by the book. Jeffrey John. On January 27th, we step into the ring in Terre Haute, Indiana at Hybrid Championship Wrestling. And you see, we both have very storied histories in Hybrid Championship Wrestling so far. You're one of the biggest guys. You're one of the guys who has main evented numerous times at HCW. But me, I'm undefeated in singles action, Jeffrey. I have defeated Kendall Fire, Dale Patricks, Jason Levi. You name them, I've put everyone down that HCW has put before me, and now you are standing before me. You see, Jeffrey, this ancient book is storied, all of its history, all of its grandeur, and I have all the knowledge of it inside of my brain. And Jeffrey, you're a fantastic wrestler. You travel all over. You get the big matches. You're going to the UK in March. I understand that. I understand why some people might think you might mop the floor with me, but you see, Jeffrey, what you don't have is my brain. What you don't have is my capacity to win. And Jeffrey, when we step into the ring on January 27th, I have no doubt that it'll be match of the night. I have no doubt that we're going to kill each other. But at the end of the night, what will matter is the winner. You can have your 7-star matches. You can come out and you can have your memorable moments. You can do your dives off the top rope. But when we step into the ring, what's going to matter is who came out the winner. And it's going to be me, Mr. By the Book, Gaston LaRue. And when I win, it will be by the book. So I want you guys to enjoy. I hope you guys enjoy this. I love doing this already, and I'm super excited for where we're going to go and what we're going to do with this podcast. So with that being said, I'm going to close out this podcast, and I will see you next week. I hope you keep doing things 100% by the book.